Fed to cut rates, Bitcoin gets a new big buyer, and what the Telegram co-founder's arrest means for TON. We cover all this right now in the Collective Shift weekly recap, actionable insights, and a breakdown into the crypto market, all in under 30 minutes usually, but probably a bit longer this time due to the week's break. But Nick, how are you this week?
Yeah, very good. How are you feeling? I know we had a bit of illness that struck the Collective Shift podcast, which I think that was our first one we missed, I reckon, since we started doing the podcast. So, we got a new streak to try and create there, Matt. But how are you feeling?
Yeah, that's it. Better now, and looking to get that streak going once again. So we've got a lot to get through. So, we might, drag it out over 30 minutes this time, but it's all the most important things from the past 2 weeks, really, that we think you deserve to know about. We'll start with the market recap as always, and even just going through the first 7 days or the last 7 days as I get my screen up here. For those of you watching on YouTube, Bitcoin is up 9% the last 7 days, ETH's up 4%, and Solana is up 11 to 12%. So yeah, we've seen Bitcoin go down under $50,000 recently. It's come surging back. If I had to sort of call out one big reason why prices rocketed back up higher, you could really put it all down to, or at least the vast majority down to, Jerome Powell's announcement at Jackson Hole last week. So the Jackson Hole symposium or gathering of central bankers from all around the world. It's a platform for central bankers to sort of talk about where their minds are at in terms of the way the economy is going and policy and whatnot. Sometimes it's a non-event, but this time it definitely will be remembered as the time when the Federal Reserve Chairman came out and basically said that the time has come to cut rates. So the market had already been pricing in rate cuts, so I was a bit surprised by, I guess, just how strongly the markets reacted to this confirmation. But yeah, we'll see in September. We will definitely see rate cuts. It's just a matter of 25 or 50 basis points. But yeah, certainly, this will be significant because it'll be the first rate cut in over 4 years. And we will expect there to be more rate cuts in the subsequent months. So much so that we've got the markets pricing in around 100 basis points worth of cuts between now and the end of the year. So, that does seem quite a hefty target, but at least 75 to 100 basis points, I would think, is a fair sort of assessment. But this is all great for cryptocurrencies because they are risk assets, as we've explained many times previously in the podcast.
Yeah, well said, Matt. And I know we talk to our members a lot just about the correlation with the external liquidity environment and what interest rates are doing to cryptocurrency and for Bitcoin. And time after time, that has probably been the thing outside of the halving, which really dominates crypto price action. There was also an interesting, a lot of talk in the US labor market with, I think, the largest downward jobs revision since 2009. Have you been following this one, Matt? A lot of people, I guess, harping on the macro and talking about recession. What do you sort of make of all this data? Because it's quite significant.
Yeah, it was for sure. I think the takeaway is that it sort of led on this downward revision. The takeaway was that maybe the US economy isn't doing as great as what we otherwise were led to believe. And so therefore, chances of recession are now higher. Some people saying, this definitely means there'll be a recession. It's sort of, no one knows yet. But I suppose you could interpret this as even more confirmation that the Fed will cut rates. So again, it was sort of viewed favorably in a weird way by the market because it just upped that increased probability of there being a rate cut. So we'll monitor whether the US does actually enter a recession or whatnot. I think you ultimately lead to the same conclusion of more stimulus, but the nature of it can be different, and that can affect appetite for risks definitely. So that's why we'll keep watching this over the months ahead.
Perfect. Changing gears now. One of the biggest stories I found in the last couple of weeks was Harris, who kind of flipped Trump in the presidential election odds. I think Trump has now kind of reversed that. It's kind of a swinging 50-50. I think a coin flip a lot of people are seeing now. So no doubt we're going to see some more flipping and switching from these odds until about 90 days until the election. but all eyes were on the Harris campaign and the Democratic Party, whether they would actually start to change their crypto rhetoric and their attitudes to cryptocurrency. We've kind of got a mixed bag here. There was no mentions of cryptocurrency in the latest Democratic Party platform. Zero mentions in the massive, I think, 70-page plus, party outline, kind of saying, hey, crypto is absolutely not on our radar at all. So some people are taking this as a negative. Some would say it's a positive because they didn't say, they would explain it outright that they were going to ban or, reduce or continue to choke the industry. But I think, more of the same potentially could be happening, and we're yet to see any fundamental policies come out from the Harris campaign. Also word about they're retaining some Biden advisors who are pretty anti-crypto, which kind of leads you to believe that they may continue this same hostile attitude to cryptocurrency. And then we saw some other rumors circulating about Gary Gensler's possible appointment under a Harris, leadership and win the election. A lot of people were kind of concerned about this because, Gary Gensler is one of the most negative figures to the cryptocurrency space in the US, and his appointment to any position of power would be very bearish. I think the market would agree upon that. Although a lot of people are kind of not sure if you trusting this reports, Matt, but a lot of people kind of shooting it down as being unlikely, or even the legitimacy of those rumors weren't backed up by any real hard evidence on that one, Matt.
Yeah, it's hard to believe too much, particularly in an election season. So what happens to Gary Gensler, even if Harris is to win the election, is still uncertain. I think even if he just is to continue as chairman, I think his tenure is sort of set to expire, I think, at the end of 2025 or the start of 2026, regardless. But if Trump wins, he'll definitely be out. If Harris wins, he'll either be out of the SEC and go back to the private sector, or he'll be out of the SEC and maybe promoted to treasurer. I suppose, it's hard to read too much into it, without, drawing too many conclusions. In terms of some other big announcements or events from the past 2 weeks, certainly over in Bitcoin land, we saw, just more discussion about wrapped versions of Bitcoin. And that sort of, again, there was some controversy about the leading solution in the market there. We won't really go too much into the details, but I suppose it opened the opportunity for another player to, I guess, throw their hat in the ring, and that was Coinbase, which amid all the controversy around wrapped Bitcoin, Coinbase sort of hinted at their own wrapped version of Bitcoin. So that would be, the ticker there would be cbBTC. So their tweet, I think, was simply that ticker and sort of, just suggesting that there will be more news to come. And we really just want to highlight this because if there is to be a bigger push towards wrapped versions of Bitcoin, it could signal, I guess, more adoption of, this DeFi narrative or decentralized finance ecosystem building around Bitcoin. For all of these years, Bitcoin's value or its price even has been sort of hampered, or there's been a ceiling on Bitcoin's price potential, in my opinion. And I think a lot of long-term Bitcoiners would share this view as well, is that if you can't use your Bitcoin as collateral for many things, or if you can use it but get really high fees because there aren't much competition or isn't much competition, it would be a lot more a bullish case for Bitcoin if there was a world where you could use your Bitcoin as collateral, or even use a solution like Coinbase's cbBTC and borrow against your Bitcoin. And if that was to be a world where that existed, there's some arguments there, and I definitely believe this, that Bitcoin's value would be a lot higher than it is today, all else being equal, because not being able to use that main asset as collateral, or being very terms that are favorable sort of more towards lenders, is not, again, it's just the untapped, I suppose, potential or untapped opportunity for Bitcoin. And it's something I think we should all definitely be focusing on, because we get so used to talking about Bitcoin's price and all of this, but when you've got sort of sources of untapped, I guess, value drivers, it just often doesn't get talked about, this aspect.
I would definitely agree that it's really underappreciated in the market at the moment. And Coinbase, the biggest public name in cryptocurrency, if they do roll out something like this that is easily able to be bridged to their base blockchain, that could really unlock it, be the big catalyst there, because we all want, if you have to take those reduced trust assumptions of trusting a big conglomerate, Coinbase is probably the most well established to take that on. So definitely one to watch, and probably we'll see an announcement of this in the coming months if they do roll it out. But keeping on Bitcoin lands here, we saw Marathon Digital. They bought $250 million worth of Bitcoin through one of their debt raises they did. So this was about 4,100 Bitcoin in mid-August at a price of 59,000 per Bitcoin. So huge amount here, and it's kind of just for seeing all these buyers step in, and miners aren't just mining it, but in this case they're probably taking on a little bit of extra leverage, getting more exposure to Bitcoin to kind of steady that balance sheet. And we'll probably start to see a few more follow the same bandwagon. Really, we saw MicroStrategy do this. We saw Square. Now we're seeing the miners really step up and be these huge amounts of demand side catalysts for Bitcoin to kind of scoop up a lot of these potentially Mt. Gox coins, which maybe we'll get into a little bit later, that have been starting to enter the market.
Yeah, it's nice to have these buyers really in the background who weren't present, last cycle. Even Tether is another great example of an entity that is continuing to accumulate Bitcoin with excess profits. And it all adds up, certainly. And now that you have a handful and even more of these companies, making these periodic sort of purchases of Bitcoin, once you talk about the halving actually happening as well, which was in April, it's easy to get quite excited about the outlook for Bitcoin. In terms of just some updates in terms of usability, it's been a long-standing criticism of crypto, just that it's too hard to onboard, too hard to actually get your head around using blockchains or interacting with them. Some progress in different ways here, with MetaMask recently announcing the rollout of their own sort of debit card in partnership with MasterCard. So we've seen things like this for a number of years now. I think what makes this unique is just the nature of it being MetaMask, just such an enormous entity. And for many people, it's their way of interacting with blockchains, like full stop. So that is going to be really significant. I think it starts the rollout in the UK and will continue on after that. So that was sort of something to make it easier for people to get started with crypto. And then we've also seen, in terms of just using cryptocurrencies or stable coins, we've seen, Apple actually come out and announce that they're going to start letting third-party developers use sort of NFC, those payments technology, where you can sort of hold your phone over a piece of hardware and it can sort of receive payments. So that's been enabled on Android for many years now for third-party developers, but Apple has always protected it and just had it for the Apple wallets. But now they're actually going to start letting other apps use this technology. So Circle, one of the largest stablecoin companies out there, has already said that they are wanting to use this new feature that Apple has enabled. So what does that actually mean? It will just mean a lot easier for the average person to use stablecoins like USDC to pay for things. So that's really exciting, and it's great to see, Apple, I suppose, making these payments a lot more possible for crypto and non-crypto sort of solutions.
Perhaps finally moving back to Bitcoin here, one we talk about a lot was the Mt. Gox distributions. We saw a few months ago, a lot of people were worried about big fears the price of Bitcoin was going to absolutely plunge because of this historic amount of Bitcoins that are being sent to old wallets and old holders. This has been 10 years in the making, really. So Mt. Gox, that big exchange, they transferred about 1,200 Bitcoin to Bitstamp, another big exchange, to then send it on to their creditors and people who were entitled to that Bitcoin. They're starting to really wind down these distributions, I've noticed. Looking at on-chain here at Harkham, they're showing the Bitcoin balances history, and this has really plummeted. We can see that about 66% of Bitcoin has been sent from these Mt. Gox wallets to different creditors or exchanges who will then pass it on. So this is a substantial amount that sits the remaining figure at about 42,000 Bitcoin, which is probably in that range of 2 to 3 billion maybe. So a good chunk of that Bitcoin is now being moved. We don't know exactly how much then has actually been sold, has actually been distributed to the end clients or end creditors, but it's a big signal to say, hey, there's a lot that moved, and we're potentially going to start to enter probably the end in the next couple of months to the Mt. Gox saga, which I don't know about you, Matt, but I'll be glad to not hear anything Mt. Gox related for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, definitely. It's so nice to have this really, more or less behind us now. I think, as we talked about a number of weeks ago, this initial, distributions that have been going since the start of July is technically the early opt-in sort of early program of distributions. I think we joked at the time that early was quite funny, but it's early relative to the rest of the creditors. So, maybe that, remaining 40,000 or so, call it 20,000, 30,000, you'd have to think would be sort of kept for the other distributions that would probably happen. You would have to think within the next 12 months or something, but what's the immediate need for that Bitcoin? If people aren't signing up for the early stage distributions, they're probably happy with, I would suspect they're probably people who don't really care about selling it. That's just my guess, but it's great to see this like behind us. And 40,000, to put it in context, I think that big Germany, that FUD or fear about the Germany selling, I think that was about 49,000 Bitcoin. So, it's really now less than that. And that didn't prove to have any impact on Bitcoin's price, even though the German government had to sort of sell it quite quickly. That's great to see. And yes, another sort of headwind that we could actually tick off, which has been a big theme of the last few months.
Perfect, Matt. And I think the final bit of industry news that I had a look here was Sony Group developing an Ethereum L2 blockchain called Sonium, I think it's called. And this is going to be launched in collaboration with Startail Labs, and they're preparing for a testnet in the coming months. I noticed here that this is actually linked to Asta Network, which was also building what's called a ZK EVM on Polygon, and they're going to be tapping into them for some liquidity. Have you been following this one, Matt? It's really made waves in the sector the last couple of weeks, with a big group like Sony starting to build on Ethereum. And it's kind of what we've suspected, that some of these bigger groups like Coinbase are, choosing Ethereum rails to build on. Very notable considering Ethereum sentiment has been pretty plummeted lately.
Yeah, it'll be really exciting to see this go live. And we're seeing here Sony saying the use cases around Sonium likely to do with creator generated content and protecting their rights, and developing mechanisms for even fair profit sharing between creators and fans. So a lot of this makes sense from a cost saving sort of point of view. Probably the legal side of things, if I had to guess, was where it'll be more cutting edge and maybe an opportunity to make things more efficient by using blockchain technology. But to see like a big name like Sony still continuing to lean into blockchain while a number of other sort of bigger companies have sort of just put it on ice for a while, is really encouraging to see. And as we've said previously in another podcast, I think they do have that local cryptocurrency exchange going live in Japan in the not too distant future as well. So Sony really going in on the crypto side of things.
Perfect, Matt. And perhaps shifting gears now away from Ethereum into other altcoin updates. One I think a lot of users would have seen is the recent Telegram founder who was arrested at an airport, and this caused the price of TON, which is a cryptocurrency that was originally launched by Telegram, now is a bit distant, and its relationship, perhaps it isn't as clear as others may understand. That dropped about 12-20% in the space of a few hours and a few days. Maybe you can provide us a bit more information on what this means for TON, because there's a bit of misinformation going around as to Telegram's influence over the TON cryptocurrency.
Yeah, it was. I think this has happened within the last 24 hours or thereabouts, maybe on Saturday. And the price of TON even plummeted even more than that 12% initially. I think it's sort of the situation is still quite fluid with France and Russia sort of people sort of speculating that they're sort of going at odds with each other, and people are now looking at this arrest and drawing conclusions about free speech and whatnot, and what does the future of Telegram's app what does it look like? We can't really comment on that now, given how dynamic the situation is at the moment, we can only really react to what does eventually happen. It feels like politics is sort of at play here. But in respect to sort of the outlook for TON, I was sort of surprised that the market did react so strongly to this, but I was also not surprised in a way. I think it's just the branding of TON coin. It makes it seem like it is Telegram's cryptocurrency, which it was, to your point, Nick, back in 2017 or 2018. As many of you would know, being in crypto a while now, they did get essentially pressured by the SEC to step away from the project and actually just drop the project, which they did, I think, in 2019 or 2020, saying that Telegram, no longer has any involvement in TON. And that sort of ignited a community sort of groundswell of support. So what we now know as TON, as the open network, is sort of a third party sort of, I guess, community who's running this cryptocurrency that has ties to Telegram initially. But from all reports, we don't actually know how much, if at all, Telegram really has any involvement with TON. We know the founder has previously sort of voiced their support for the TON project, but we don't actually know much else other than that in terms of what their plans are. So I suppose with the market in general associating TON coin with Telegram's cryptocurrency, which is incorrect technically, but it doesn't really matter. What the market is ultimately, I guess, the really thing you have to respect here. And the market still thinks this is Telegram's cryptocurrency. So for the meantime, I think events related to this founder will probably dictate the price of TON. But I suppose if there is a world where Telegram is forced to really, maybe share information with governments, which I think is what they've been wanting, and if they do sort of bend the knee and force their app to be more censored, I suppose you could make a case for that having trickle-down effects in terms of maybe users being disgruntled and maybe moving to another app. And then that could maybe increase the bear case for something like TON, which, even though it's not associated with the Telegram, the company, it definitely, at least in the short term, is reliant on Telegram being a popular app and things like that. So maybe you could draw that conclusion. That could justify maybe the nervousness or uncertainty about the future of Telegram as an app that a lot of people use.
Yeah, I agree with that. And one thing you have to understand too is TON has recently been used as to share sort of adoption or I think some revenues, Matt, with Telegram channels. So it's kind of been embedded in a way into the app, but not explicitly by Telegram, but just from the Open Foundation and working with Telegram to support the cryptocurrency. So that's also where there's a bit of synergy here. And in a world where then Telegram is prosecuted and potentially it is less used, then that would probably have knock-on effects to, how much demand there is for TON, because TON is integrated into some of these channels in Telegram. So that's probably the only way that I can think of that this would really impact TON. But there's a lot to play out, and potentially this is another potential tailwind for crypto social media companies that was one of the big touted use cases, and that had been developed like the likes of Lens and then Farcaster, which has really gained a lot of momentum. Potentially this is a bit of a layup for them to see more adoption, especially from the crypto crowd.
Yeah, it's another good thing that could flourish or be affected by this, I suppose. So we'll definitely be reporting on this, I dare say, next week as well. But in the meantime, we do have news here about the Solana ETF applications in the US.
So here they were rejected. I think it was some 19B4 filings for these Solana ETFs, which I think were put forth by two pretty respected issuers there. So this came down and kind of hinted that, hey, they're kind of viewing Solana potentially as a security. Importantly here, obviously, we're not lawyers, and this is not like legal advice. So definitely check this one out further. But it just appears that's what's been going on here, and there's more pressure on potentially Solana viewed in that security-like label, opposed to Ethereum, which was recently granted that ETF quite conclusively, actually, and we saw tons then get adopted, and which we potentially get into a bit later. But for Solana, it's probably going to be a bit of a harder slog to get that ETF status. And it's kind of confirmation that I think, I know we mentioned that we were going to be surprised if there was going to be a Solana ETF, and we probably were best case scenario maybe in the next year if there's a change in government. But it just kind of reiterates the importance of that election then, of these, regulators who potentially could be replaced. There could be a change of the guard here, but that seems to be really important for the future of a Solana ETF. So, long story short, no Solana ETF probably by the end of the year, although we've seen crazier things happen. That would be one of the crazier things considering this latest report of the rejection.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely not by the end of the year. And yeah, just to reiterate, as Nick said, it wasn't actually, it wasn't formally rejected. Like, there's no public documents about this. This is like a report from the block saying, it was more just quietly withdrawn by, the CBOE, in this case, the exchange, filing on behalf of the issuers. And they all of a sudden just withdrew that application, and now people are sort of questioning why that happened. And according to the block, according to some of their sources, the SEC might have had a word with the applicants, basically saying like there's no chance that this will be passed. So that's the state of play for now, and we'll just keep an eye on that, whether Solana can get an ETF eventually in the years to come. In terms of Arbitrum here, we've spoken about how ARB might be getting more utility soon in terms of being able to stake ARB and get back sort of a liquid staked Arbitrum token, and then therefore those holders are able to get some revenue or some excess sort of positive sort of cash flow redistributed to them. They're sort of up leading the way with the likes of Aave in terms of the two that are most likely to do this soon. Arbitrum, as we've discussed recently, it's sort of, they're doing it for reasons that are in addition to just profit sharing. They're sort of saying it's due to security and just governance participation, trying to incentivize that. But in terms of where that is at, I think we recently talked about a temperature check being passed. So the Arbitrum community really liking the idea of it to simplify it. And now the voting is officially live at the time of recording. So September the 6th will be when this vote ends. And at the moment, it's just started, I think, on the weekend, but we've got, very strong show of support here for this token proposal, this proposal being passed. And if so, it would definitely show some signs of maturing in terms of what these, L2 tokens that are widely criticized for their lack of utility to date. It would definitely be a big sign of progress for Arbitrum there, being one of the biggest, if not the biggest layer 2 by a lot of different metrics.
You hit the nail on the head there, and hopefully we start to see some more value accrual start to go towards these Ethereum L2 tokens, which that's been the biggest knock on them, that there haven't really been too much actual utility placed on them as of yet. Optimism is another big one that's battling with Arbitrum. As the king of Ethereum's L2s, they recently announced a plan to fix a lot of the poor user experience that a lot of people may be, experiencing on chain by unifying a lot of the standards across what it calls its superchain. So this sounds really confusing, but it's essentially just this layer that people can build on the OP stack, this kind of software, infrastructure, and then you can gain access to any upgrades that happen, a lot of the liquidity, a lot of the users. So eventually what Optimism are proposing here is that you won't have to toggle your browser to change that little bar there to Optimism or to another chain that you want to interact with if it is on the same shared super chain that it's being called. So what this looks like for an end user is actually pretty good. It's going to be, you may be using a DeFi application that is, whether it's on Optimism or whether it's on Base, but you'll be able to just use it and not actually have to click and sign your wallet multiple times. If the tokens you want are on Base, but you're on Optimism, you won't even need to toggle. You just essentially click the order and it gets filled and everything operates in the background. So at a high level, that's what Optimism is trying to create. It's trying to abstract all of these chains, all of these different kind of Ethereum tokens that are out there into just one simple user experience. So that's going to be a huge deal, and really looking forward to that, because if Ethereum is to succeed, it really needs to solve a lot of this abstraction and confusion around using Ethereum L2s. Finally here, just probably a more negative part to Optimism, they recently disabled its fraud proofs, which are the backbone to secure the chain. And it just means that it kind of had a few vulnerabilities that they've had to go back and patch. And now the Optimism chain is basically back to being centralized, and with the Optimism labs, I think, that are, in charge of saying, hey, whether transactions are good or bad, that's a high level. That was disabled. So kind of a concern there for Optimism. Hopefully they can rebound and fix a lot of these vulnerabilities and steer right ahead of trying to have this, I guess, momentum to decentralization and to try and turn things over to the community and away from the centralized Optimism team and the Optimism Labs team.
Yeah, a lot going on L2 in the L2 space, which is great. Malaysian government, so they are adopting WorldCoin for proof of humanity, sort of digital ID. So we've talked about WorldCoin. It's the hardware where the orb where you scan your eyeballs and you sort of, I guess, then have a relationship with or you've got an identity, so to speak, according to their own sort of network. So that's continuing to gain adoption, throughout the world. And we've seen a R&D division of the Malaysian government has formalized a partnership with the WorldCoin Foundation and a couple of other entities here. The collaboration aiming to integrate WorldCoin's technology into Malaysia's digital infrastructure. So the focus here is just on enhancing digital credentials and validating sort of digital proof of humanness in the era of artificial intelligence, where it is becoming more of a problem as AI adoption grows. Can you prove, I guess, your humanness online, and what solutions are sort of governing that? Is it very centralized, etc., etc. So WorldCoin it's their attempt to sort of solve that problem, and Malaysia, it seems like, is at least starting to, I guess, play around with the WorldCoin technology to really simplify it. So yeah, some progress there.
Heading to Bitcoin land, actually, we got Babylon Finance. It's another, probably the biggest altcoin development that I was following this week. They launched its Bitcoin staking service. So as we talked about earlier in the pod, untapping all this idle Bitcoin sitting there unused, Babylon wants to try and use some of it to secure proof of stake chains. So trying to use the best parts of Bitcoin, the best parts of its proof of work chain and security, to securing some of these other proof of stake chains. So huge deal here. They're launched in a very small capacity, I think to 1,000 Bitcoin. Expect them to slowly roll it out. A big signal here will be how fast the caps get reached and how fast and how much amount of Bitcoin is, I guess, staked, because that's going to be a huge deal into seeing whether there's actually any appetite for this. Because the one thing I'm looking for is that APY is the risk of trying to get that extra yield worth actually having to move your Bitcoin to some of these more, not concerning, but very early stage and more risky centralized projects that are launching. So one to watch, especially on the Bitcoin lending and collateral landscape there.
Thanks, Nick. Last one here, we have Story Protocol. So the team behind that has come out and announced a raise of 80 million. So this is the third funding round for Story for this team, and it's now brought their total funding to, I believe, over or at least 140 million, if not slightly more than that. So the lead of this latest $80 million Series B round was A16Z. That is one of the larger rounds for a crypto project in 2024, most definitely. So it's one to keep an eye on. It's not one that I've sort of dug in too deeply into. All I know is that they're targeting sort of just the use of intellectual property or IP and trying to, I suppose, bringing in functions of blockchains to really help the whole IP space move more smoothly and, I suppose, be more efficient in terms of all the legal back and forth that you have to do in the IP space, and just all the costs of legal, and just that can be quite prohibitive to a lot of creators and a lot of people who would otherwise maybe have great ideas but just can't get up and going. And I'm sure for the bigger sort of IP players, it could also be used more efficiently if they were to use something like Story Protocol. That's at least the pitch. It sounds very early on, given the nature of the raise being at those early stages. So now they have a lot more funding to really get up and going. And you can expect it here, at the very least, you'll be hearing about Story Protocol quite a lot in 2025, going off of the timing of this sort of announcement. But it's good to see, new problems, or at least alleged problems, at least from these founders, sort of getting after it, rather than a bunch of these copycat sort of Ethereum L2s that are just general. So we'll see how this one goes. Okay, that brings us to things to look forward to. And September, or in the end of August, is going to be an incredibly busy month, which is great. We haven't said that in a while, and now we've got the summer months ending in the northern hemisphere. That is when a lot of people on holidays, a lot of projects put off announcements until after summer. So we're expecting a really eventful September through to the end of the year. And we'll just touch on some really big events that we're monitoring. Nick, the Tron situation, have you got any updates there?
Thanks, Matt. So Tron is actually one of the biggest blockchains in terms of adoption that a lot of people aren't really familiar with, or would surprise them, seeing that it's always one of the biggest leader in stablecoin volumes, especially. They actually were in a bit of controversy this week with the USDD stablecoin here. The Tron Reserve DAO removed about 750 million worth of Bitcoin backing Justin Sun, who was quite a notorious crypto figure who was the creator of Tron blockchain, removed it from his USDD stablecoin here now. So it's in a way a hybrid of the Luna Tether UST stablecoin, and then other stablecoins you'll see like with Maker's DAI, for example. So it is linked to, but not in a catastrophic way like we saw UST. But in just a quick summary here, USDD is required to be burnt or minted. I mean, Tron is stablecoin, TRX is to be bought or sold depending on USDT supply. So they are linked in a way, although it can't be kind of printed in this death spiral that you sort of call it, that we saw with Luna and Terra. So not a good look on the face of it when you have 750 million worth of Bitcoin backing something that is no longer there. It just means that a lot of the backing is now, I think, basically 90-95% on Tron or TRX coins. So a lot of that is just backed by Tron, which would send a few worries into people who are worrying about UST and the Luna stablecoin fiasco. So just a small thing there to look forward to. And if you are a holder of USDD, maybe that's something to consider, that some of the backing has been removed, and that's probably just a background catalyst. If things get worse, that could have flow-on effects, but still a relatively small stablecoin in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, that last point's the most important thing, I think, in terms of impact. If it is to keep growing, which Tron has been growing a lot recently, so if USDD, the supply of that keeps growing, I think it's definitely worth monitoring just how the backing and collateral ratio is sort of going for this stablecoin. So yeah, a good shout out there, Nick. In terms of September, we've got a lot to look forward to, and I think putting it in terms of just order by dates, I think September 10th is one to put on your calendar. That is when, September 11 probably for Australian listeners and viewers. We've got Trump and Harris. They're the two candidates for the upcoming election in the US. They will be debating for the first time. That first debate is always the most impactful. You could argue the subsequent ones don't even really matter at all, but that first one, that could really dictate the odds and the betting markets and all of that, which, as we've seen recently, is a driver. It's definitely an impact on crypto prices. People argue how impactful is it, but at the end of the day, it is impactful for reasons we've discussed previously. We've got September 18. That's another one to write down. That's when we have the US Federal Reserve announcing their rate cuts. Will it be 25 basis points or 50 basis points that they cut by? That will be sort of a focus leading up to that. But end of the day, they will have their first rate cut in over 4 years, and they will do subsequent ones almost certainly after that. Solana Breakpoint. Do you know the date to that one, Nick? I think it's around the middle to end of September. Yeah,
so it's 20 to 21 of September. So end of September, and we're really looking forward to some big announcements there. I know Aave's hand has been thrown in the ring, whether they're going to announce a Solana product and, really capitalize on their growing momentum. But no doubt we're going to see huge announcements, maybe something to do with Firedancer, which is this big upgrade that's been really promoted by a lot of the Solana community to make the network more faster, but more resilient and hardened in the case of any catastrophes. So this is what I think Solana Labs has said they would build if they were building Solana today. So big one to watch, and hopefully we get some more information on that at Breakpoint.
Yeah, that's it. A packed September in a month that historically is one of Bitcoin's least favorite months. So we'll see. It's a unique one where we've got a lot of things to look forward to. Noting that seasonality that September tends to be, I think, Bitcoin's worst month of the year according to some averages. So we'll keep that in mind as we navigate September. But the thing we've been telling members and just internally is things are looking very rosy from now to the end of the year, which is something we haven't said in a while. But before then, was there anything else you're looking forward to, Nick?
Not specifically here. We got Trump's kind of promoted his family's new cryptocurrency platform. That's something that, again, you were telling me a few years ago, you have one of the leaders to win the election, and he's talking about building a DeFi platform. I would have thought you're absolutely bonkers. And it would actually be something that we probably would have talked more about, or be surprised we didn't chat more about. But as we covered in the last 2 weeks pod, hey, there's still a lot here that needs to be, shown what they're building on, if there's actually something that they're actually going to execute, or whether it's kind of a quick together project to try and harness the cryptocurrency, narrative here and that momentum that Trump has behind crypto. That's a lot to play out. So just a small one there, and hope maybe we might see more details on Trump. But perhaps we can shift to Underappreciated there, Matt. We covered quite a lot here. So is there anything else that you felt kind of the market missed in the last couple of weeks?
Yeah, one that I had highlighted here to raise was, if I get my screen up here, just with Polymarket, there's been a lot of focus on it with the elections coming up, people essentially putting bets on outcomes of the election, and it's sort of tied in some ways, or partially tied to blockchain. So the Polymarket is sort of deployed on Polygon, but you wouldn't notice it using the app. And I think the biggest thing I sort of had to raise, so would be Underappreciated, is sort of Polymarket's building out the business in ways, I suppose, for life after the elections, which is a big I guess thing that they'll have to navigate, noting how popular the elections are. But we have here Perplexity sort of doing a partnership with Polymarket, which I barely saw anyone talk about. But when you talk about what could be the next catalyst for big influx of users for crypto, even indirectly users of crypto, I think this is something. So prediction markets could be, I suppose, a big upside potential. Sure, they could flop, or they could turn out to not be much. We've seen prediction markets tried to be, I guess, built in the past, and just the product market fit wasn't there. But now when we have such fast growing companies like Perplexity, which people are using as replacement for Google in some cases, this sort of AI search summary, and now they're sort of partnering with Polymarket to be able to throw in some real-time probability predictions, which the grand vision for prediction markets is to be this thing that is the source of truth. We're a long way away from that happening, but that's sort of the vision. And look, if this is to really continue growing, we'll be keeping my eye on sort of the adoption of this, because I'm still looking, I've still got my eye out for catalysts that could be coming in this bull market still, and prediction markets is a potential one.
Great find there, Matt, on the Perplexity front. My shout out would have to go to State Street. So shifting gears here to more TradFi, but they partnered with crypto native, builder Taurus to offer tokenization services, and plans to build out a digital asset custody, when US regulations become more favorable. So they've doubled down and saying, hey, we want in on the crypto custody gain. Important to contrast this and remember, hey, State Street, they're a global custody bank with 44 trillion assets or something to that tune. So they're a huge conglomerate here of their place in traditional finance. And they were a big advocate against SAB 121, which is this rule in the US at the moment that really doesn't allow banks to custody crypto assets. And they've been trying to advocate for the removal of that law to get banks, into the crypto custody game. So big one here with State Street, really looking to double down on crypto custody and get involved in tokenization.
Good find there, Nick. So that is a wrap for this week. A bit of a longer one, as we said, just with the gap in between podcasts. But yeah, if you are looking for more insights, definitely head to our newsletter page where you can get free weekly market insights straight to your inbox every Friday. So you can subscribe to our newsletter over at collectiveshift.io/newsletter. That's collectiveshift.io/newsletter.